This morning's workshop is Imagine 2040, Build Cooperatively. My name is Jocelyn Langer. I'm the Executive Director of NOFA Mass, and my co-host today is Ashley Kenny, and Ashley is our workshop coordinator. And I have a few announcements, and we'll be jumping in, and I'll turn things over to Suzette and Bonnie in just a moment. We could not pull off this conference without help from a lot of really wonderful supporters who are sponsoring us. So please, if you do business with these companies, please thank them for their support of NOFA Mass and of our winter conference. These are the gold sponsors and our silver sponsors.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and welcome everyone. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves here, but we want to hear from you. We want this to be interactive. We will have time at the end for interaction and discussion. At that time, it would be great for you to turn your cameras on if you're able, so we can see each other in this virtual world. But as we're introducing ourselves, we want to get a sense from you, what do you hope to get out of our time together? So if you can take a second and type something in the chat, even if it's a couple words, that would help us make sure we hit on why you're here, why you're interested in this topic. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Bonnie Hudspeth. I'm with the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, and I work on cooperative development. We'll be sharing a little bit more about what NFCA, or Neighboring Food Co-op Association, is later on. I also serve on the board of Cooperative Fund of New England, which is a community development finance institution that invests in cooperatively and community-owned businesses. I also was involved with starting the Monadnock Food Co-op in Keene, New Hampshire. So I had some on-the-ground community organizing experience as well. And I've worked on a number of farms. And Suzette, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great, thanks, Bonnie. So can you see our first screen there, our first slide? Just want to check and make sure that's all set. Okay, good. So
yep, good.
I worked for many years for Franklin Community Co-op, a food co-op in Greenfield and Shelburne Falls, as a co-general manager, and currently work for now 3 years for the Neighboring Food Co-op Association. And I've been involved with co-ops since the 80s. It was great. Brought back some good memories from Greg Watson's talk last night around remembering Mel King and the New Alchemy Institute, and so it was good to have that included in his history. More recently, I decided a few years ago to get my master's in management of co-ops and credit unions and be able to continue working on this path of building cooperative economy. So it's great to be able to be here and share with you some of our NFCA, Neighboring Food Co-op Association, work and imagining what more we can do in the next couple decades. Let's see. So
great. If you advance the next slide.
Great.
I loved hearing what, it's great to hear what brought people to the virtual room. And so I see kind of folks, Priscilla's interested in starting, where to start, some resources, possible conversions. Doug is interested in examples of agricultural land trusts and regional agricultural commons. There's a lot of work around that happening. And Heather's interested in policy or legislative barriers. Woo! To growing co-ops. That's a big topic we could dive into. We will touch on some of these things. This summer, I presented a workshop specifically on what Priscilla was interested in. How do you start? What are resources for starting a cooperative? It looks like Brucey's also interested in relocalization of food production. We will certainly hit on some of these, and we will provide resources at the end for more information. So our plan for today is really focusing on some context for kind of how we got here, where we are, and history, briefly discussing what is a co-op, because every time we don't, it comes up in a number of different ways in questions. So having clarity on what is a cooperative, what's a cooperative form of business, and then examples of co-ops in our economy and what co-ops offer. And I see some of you already thinking about what they offer. And then at the end, we want to have time to discuss, look to the future in the next slightly less than 20 years, 2040, what are we going to be doing to manifest food system and community infrastructure that actually serves us and represents us? And then we're going to wrap up. So I'm going to turn it over to Suzette to kind of give us some context and history to jump into.
Yeah, so I was really impressed with Greg's Watson's talk last night, and I felt like he gave some really great history around specifically Massachusetts and our agriculture, but also the people that were involved and are involved. And so I am at, in looking back, I think of like these folks at the in Maynard, Mass, who had this cooperative grocery store. Could they have imagined their place and their participation in the food system? And so when we look forward, we ask these these questions: who will continue to be our farmers and our producers? What will our regional food system look like? And who controls our food and our food system? And of course, people involved with NOFA and attending the NOFA conference, these are all questions that come up and are very much a part of how we view our food system. So then we ask, what do we have in place now that we can build on, creating more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable economies? And that's, what, of course, it's not news to anybody involved with NOFA, but the questions of a question to continue to be asked and answered. And let's see. We have the questions of one thing I'm realizing. Sorry, folks. I'm realizing that I can't see my numbers when I'm doing this. Okay. So we just have these other things that we'd like to share in the workshop as we go, and want to make sure that we leave enough time in the end for people to think about their place and what their contributions can be. And we don't know how much even small acts might contribute to building our sustainable economy as we go. Because who could have predicted what would have happened with the pandemic and how that has impacted our economy? Of course, there were signs of that in our, as we've looked back in history, we see other places where our food systems have been impacted, but our context, in the context right now, there's this, the largest recession that we're having, and business closures. We don't know what those impacts will be with the number of closings. People, farmers, of course, and food producers have had to figure out how to adjust with the number of restaurants and schools, food programs closing. And and at the same time, there are, of course, the climate change issues and hunger and insecurity, and as Greg brought up, also the systemic racism and economic inequality around access to farmland and farms. So these are, this context that we're in is heavy. And this with the impacts of the pandemic, even more so, what we saw, that disruption of distribution, which if we remember back to April and March, April, May of this year, with shortages and really lots of disruption to our food system, and revealing that our food system had, which we all had a sense of, but there's some real issues that came forward, and of course it didn't happen all at once. There's been a long increase of consolidation and concentration of control, and family farms and farm workers have increased risk, but they've always been, there's been a decline and some issues. And of course, what we're seeing now is that the most vulnerable are the largest, the greatest impact. And that's, and I guess the unknowns are really those of us that work in the food system and our economy it's pretty depressing hearing the number of people that are on receiving assistance now just to survive. It's hugely increased, and these are all things, of course, that we don't have to tell folks probably in this workshop about. But in all of these challenging times, with these various challenging times throughout history, communities have responded to the challenging times, and as we look back through history and across the globe, communities come together to create systems of mutual aid and cooperation to respond to injustices and build community health and wealth. And in these examples that we have globally, but also in our own history, indigenous traditions, informal lending circles, land clearing and road building, harvesting activities, all of these things are which there's been, you could have whole presentations now on just the rich history of mutual aid and cooperation in the U.S. in a variety of communities. And often when we've when the history of the sort of modern cooperative gets told, what we are in the past, we've gone back to heavily in post-industrial revolution in England, but we want to also make sure that we recognize that, and we're doing a little better in telling those histories in the U.S. around the diversity that people have had in the diverse responses that people have had in this country around responding to need. And so as we get better in a little better in telling our own histories and stories, we still want to make sure that we recognize the modern cooperative movement, post-industrial revolution, 1800s. Imagining potentially how pretty bad it was then. Some of the bullet points look similar to now, but what that meant was that it pushed the folks then to think of another way, and they organized themselves. The Rochdale Society of Equitable Pioneers came out of this strife and challenges. The weavers and workers came together, knew that they needed to do something else. They formed a member-owned grocery store, and it came about because they wanted to have access to food that wasn't really poor quality, and that they could work together on something. They wanted to build and be in control of their food system, and they wanted to be able to help themselves and have control over, because and coming from a really desperate place. This is where the originator of the cooperative principles came to, and so we think of, I mean, there's so much around our cooperative history, but if we want to make these connections, like, so we ask ourselves, you know, what if we, and I'm imagining that then too, if people were thinking, you know, what if we could have a people-centered economy. Greg Watson talked about the circular economy, and what if it was based on self-help and participation, and rooted in our local communities, accountable to the people that it served. What if we could put the common good before private gain, and it was more sustainable? What if it was more equitable and democratic, and what if it was accessible for everyday people, not just those that are of privilege? What if it was flexible and innovative? And what if it was tested and proven? You know, what if we can imagine all of those things? They all seem to be things that I would want to aspire to have in our economies, in our economy, specifically in our food economy. And that's where what is so attractive to me in my as I learned about cooperatives as community builders, community building and community organizing, I said, oh, what, we do have something. We have this this structure called cooperatives, and so the basic structure of a cooperative is the business that is equitably owned and democratically controlled by its members for their common good, the good of the community, and to accomplish a shared goal and purpose. I mean, it's to benefit the users that are that own the cooperative, rather than to make money for another entity. So the other core component is that any surplus is reinvested in the business or distributed among members in proportion to their use of the business. And they seem like they're perhaps simple tenets, but they're extremely important in the structure of it. And so examples like Deep Root co-op in Vermont, the farmers are the owners of the business, and they make the decisions about how they want their what they want their activity to be, what the participation is, and how they will operate. And then they, if there is surplus or profit, it goes directly back to them, rather than being extractive and going somewhere else. I mentioned the cooperative values, those and principles, and those cooperative values are core to any organization that organizes themselves as a cooperative. So it's the core values are an important component of the cooperative structure as well. Let's see. So at this and here, what we've learned too is that the cooperative business model is a flexible model as well. It can be applied as organized with agricultural co-ops, fishing co-ops, of course, consumer food co-ops. We've seen worker co-ops from technology to home health care, our credit unions are cooperatives owned by the people that are members of the cooperative. Small businesses or larger businesses, health and insurance, those utility co-ops. There's so many, any type of business that you want to imagine. The farmers union co-op, gin cooperative, gin manufacturing cooperative, and so there's the, because of the core is flexible for the structure of a cooperative. It can be applied in whatever area people want to organize.
I have a poll ready, Suzette, to launch to see.
Oh wait, no.
We want to see.
Oh yeah.
What co-ops are you a member of?
Right.
Everyone see it?
Sorry, I didn't pause there for you, Bonnie, to start that poll.
It's okay. I burst into the poll. Can everyone see it? Great.
So with polls, you can only do 10 slots, but of course there are other types of co-ops that people could be members of as well. So we'll give folks a moment to answer what type of co-op they might be a member of. And then we have, we are fortunate in this area to have lots of different types of co-ops. We have a pretty strong and growing worker co-op businesses in our area. We have, of course, lots of food co-ops and credit unions, seeing that credit unions are definitely a co-op that people are members of. We have multiple credit unions in our area.
It looks like maybe this poll can only let people choose one, but some people are a member of more than one co-op.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's see. So is this, so am I seeing, I'm seeing the results, right?
Yeah, I can share. I'll end the poll now. Sorry that you can't choose multiple options. We were hoping you could, but sometimes the poll setup is hard to figure that out. Okay, so now we're going to see.
We've got a child care co-op, farmer co-op, of course, food co-ops, credit unions. So we have there's various maps of how co-ops are distributed across the United States, and we have this map. Let's see, get rid of that. We have this map that's a national map showing a certain type of co-op. Can anyone, does anybody know what type of co-op this particular map, the darker areas are representing? And people can either, I don't know, I can't see the chat, or they could unmute and just say.
Someone guessed farm co-op.
No. I'm very aware that, look at Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, they don't have any dark area of this, which is interesting. But this is a map of rural electric co-ops. And we don't have any, oops, why can't I advance? Oh dear. I just lost the ability to advance for some reason. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the rural electric co-ops are all over the United States, except for there's a few gaps where different power utilities are dominant. But they were organized in response to a need when electrification was happening. The rural areas were not seeing it rural residents were not seeing it happening in a timely way in their area. So they organized electric co-ops to provide this service to them, and they're one of the biggest cooperatives across the country. And in general, you know, what of all the different types of co-ops, 1 in 3 Americans are members of some type of co-op. So there's participation in co-ops across our country, sometimes without people actually even realizing that they are a part of a co-op, like an electric co-op or a credit union. Sometimes people don't connect, but the fact is that cooperatives are working in lots of different areas for people across the country, and in response to the need that has been, in response to some need that wasn't being met otherwise. And so we can, there's so much that could be looked at around different types of co-ops, and more specifically about how, you know, forming a co-op. But we want to bring it back to New England and to to the Northeast in our region. And Bonnie's gonna dive in a little bit about our food co-ops, and we are fortunate to have so many food co-ops in our region, and learn from them through the years. So, sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, thanks, Suzette. Well, and I saw Dale just said this lack of visibility. People don't realize that their co-op credit union is a cooperative. And so that's something that we've been working a lot with our food co-ops, is to tell their story about how cooperatives are different, right? Because food co-ops are much more than just stores. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but appreciate that comment, because we agree. So what does this impact look like in our region, just looking at one sector of food co-ops? So we're an association through Neighboring Food Co-op Association. We're actually a co-op of co-ops, food co-ops, working together toward a shared vision that I'm imagining many of you share: a thriving cooperative economy and a just and healthy food system. And so our co-ops are collectively owned by more than 150,000 people, including some of you I saw in the poll, right, across New England and New York. And we exist to support our co-ops' shared growth, innovation, and success. And so the collective impact on our local food system and economy is substantial, just from our food co-ops. And to give an example, in 2019, we're updating our impact this year soon, but our co-op sold over $93 million in local products. And on average, around a third of our total sales are coming from local suppliers and farmers. And anyone have any guesses with how much, what is the total percent from national grocery stores of local products? Any guesses? You can type in the chat. I just shared that a third of our co-op sales or more come from local producers. Any guesses? You can hold up your hand. How many percent? 1. You know, Priscilla, you're pretty darn close. 1.8%. That is not a substantial contribution or support of local farmers and producers in most grocery stores across our country, right? And in addition to that, our co-ops also prioritize carrying products made by other cooperatives. And like Dale mentioned, sometimes we don't even know what these products are from cooperatives. So I'm gonna see from you all, what co-op made products have you consumed in the last week or so?
And
Yes,
Bonnie, I made a new poll because I think I didn't know how to click the multiple option thing. So if you
okay,
go to
good.
poll 4.
Yep. Great. I noticed and appreciated that. All right, so we want to hear from you. What have you eaten in the last week or two that has come from a co-op? So some of these you might have known. You know, most of us know Organic Valley is a cooperative of dairy farmers. You might not have known if you're orange juice drinker that Florida Naturals is actually a cooperative of orange farmers and growers. And then we got some great locals. Artisan Beverage Cooperative is based right out of Greenfield, Mass. Real Pickles is based out of where, Suzette? Pretty darn close to
That's Greenfield also.
Greenfield, Massachusetts. And then Equal Exchange. I see the Equal Exchange numbers ticking up. We love our coffee, tea, and hot chocolate that is produced by farmer cooperatives, sold through a worker cooperative, and you can buy it on the shelf of your food co-op. So a complete cooperative cycle is possible. We can imagine that. I'll give a couple more minutes. But it's great to see that, yeah, and the Simply Organic or Frontier, there's a lot of really good cooperatively produced teas, spices, and herbs.
If I, as a host, I can't participate in it, but if I did, I would be clicking the La Riojana wine, especially this last week for some reason. I'm not sure. You can find it in your local food co-op. La Riojana distributes co-op to co-op.
And Suzette, I'm not familiar with I'm a Vermonter, but I'm really close to Massachusetts. I'm in the southern part of Vermont, right near Bernardston, Mass. But what is Our Family Farms?
Agricultural milk. It's actually, I think technically it might be a marketing co-op, but the farmers are the owners of this Our Family Farms milk cooperative.
Great. So let's see. Okay, Equal Exchange pulling ahead for the most commonly consumed co-op product in the last week for most of us. With it looks like a lot of real pickle, a lot of fermented food lovers on this participating, which is not surprising at a NOFA conference. And then also Organic Valley, their half and half is out of this world. So great. Well, thanks for participating and sharing some of the cooperatives that you're already purchasing from, maybe not even realizing that they're co-ops, right? So Suzette, if you advance to the next slide, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. Oops, I don't understand. Oh.
Okay.
Oh dear. Did
Well,
it go to the
while
next
that's
slide?
happening, it's co-op innovation.
What? Okay.
Right there, yep, with Putney
Okay.
Food Co-op.
That
So
was tricky.
one thing that I think is curious is that we have somehow collectively created a reality, an economy, a healthcare system, right, that Suzette was mentioning, that very few of us would have chosen. How the hell did we get here, right? And the answer to that could be a whole nother workshop. But we know it's based to making decisions on profit versus people, right? And so as we look to the future and addressing the challenges that we're facing in our communities, I'd like us to think about what's going to help us build the future that we actually want, and how can we build it together? So if you go to the next slide, Suzette, I want to share some direct examples to demonstrate how co-ops are offering our communities tools for rebuilding and for long-term resilience. So one of the things I think that's really important, whether you're a farm co-op, a food co-op, an electric co-op, is that co-ops are building on the skills and assets of our communities. We're building up talent, we're building up opportunity, and bringing people together to share our needs and our solutions. And that's very mutually aid oriented, right? Believing that all of us bring value to the table. And so a cooperative structure allows us to build up power within our communities and to create ultimately stronger communities without relying on some force, some person, some expertise outside of our communities, believing that we know what our communities need and we can empower ourselves to create the solutions. So an example of that is like last year, more than 12,000 people joined their local food co-ops. We're seeing growing interest in participating in a more sustainable, inclusive future. Next, please. And our structure allows us to pool together small amounts of money to build businesses that to collectively serve us that none of us could do as individuals, right? I definitely couldn't create a business with $12 million revenue, but for $150, I could join one of our local food co-ops with thousands of other people in my community And collectively, we create a food cooperative where that is doing $12 million in sales. And we know a third of that is going back to local farmers and producers, right? And a substantial amount of that is paying good wages to staff, right? So a cooperative allows us to leverage limited community resources for bigger impact together. Next, please. And that sweet guy is from Portland Food Co-op, standing behind plexiglass at the beginning of the pandemic. So a really important part of this is prioritizing people over profit, right? And that makes all the difference in a time like this of crisis, where our health is at stake, where our co-op staff are frontline workers, and where we need businesses that are focusing on our needs versus lining the pockets of sole owners or distant shareholders or mega fat CEO baby, as I like to call this imaginary character, right? We know who they are. When profit is not the bottom line of our businesses, resources can be reinvested into our community, right? And so they can be returned to the members of our community. And our food co-ops have the ability to build up good local jobs that are going to stay in our community. And not only that, but this crisis is shining a light on how our co-ops are prioritizing the safety and care and compensation of their staff, which is not happening in other organizations. At the beginning of the pandemic, some unnamed grocery store in our community was telling their workers don't wear masks because they didn't want to scare customers. That is about making profit as a bottom line. That is about public perception. That is not about safety and protecting customers, even if less people are putting money into your corporation, right? So that and what's happened right now is our co-ops have been giving their employees and staff bonuses because they recognize what they are risking by making sure that their community is fed. Okay, next, please. And one of the things that this pandemic has made certainly clear is the vulnerability of our food system because of it being so concentrated. In the beginning, when the supply chains were collapsing and people were hoarding and doing ridiculous things, our food co-ops were able to weather this storm because of the diversity of local suppliers they were working with. And they would call up and say, we're out of eggs. And they would call their local farmer who would deliver directly to their door. And they would say, do you have any more eggs? And more eggs would appear, right? So customers were also recognizing that more, like, wow, control of our food system matters, and food co-ops create a way for us to support local farmers by doing things like buying substantially more from local farmers and being a trusted and stable year-round market, which is this was the reason why a number of our food co-ops were actually started, to be a stable year-round trusted market for regional producers. And, you know, we talked about our co-op selling over $90 million worth of local products last year. So money is going directly into our region to the locals and farmers and producers. And I wanted you to see this cool map of one of our member food co-ops, River Valley Co-op in Northampton, Massachusetts. This is a map of, you can see the local producers and vendors they work with. And on average, our food co-ops work with over 240 farmers and producers, and some of them work with over 300. So that if they have a supply shortage or someone has a drought or someone is dealing, you know, that the farmers can work and fill in the pieces and support each other. So, you know, this is just one demonstration of the ability to create resilience in our food system through this stable market that's actually supporting farmers and producers.
And also to say, so this is a relatively new educational piece that River Valley has done, and you can go to their website, and actually each of the pins connect to the producer or farmer, and you can, you know, see who they are and learn about them. And it's a great educational piece to help reinforce, you know, and understand what they mean when they're saying they support local producers and growers.
Thanks, Suzette. Yeah, I want to go back and look at what are those businesses on Cape Cod. Maybe, you know, there are fisheries, there are cooperative fisheries in New Hampshire. And the cooperative structure has actually saved has saved dairy farmers in our region many, many times over, and has saved fisheries as well. Next, please.
Okay.
So the good news is that our food co-ops have a track record of weathering crises like this before. The majority of our food co-ops not only survived, but they actually thrived. They grew in sales, they added new members during the Great Recession, when, of 2008 to 2011, that era, when many businesses were closing. And two of our food co-ops actually opened out of unmet need during the Great Depression. So you can see this is Hanover Consumer Cooperative, opened in the 30s and out of unmet need. So our co-ops have a track record of not only weathering storms, but coming out stronger. And our average food co-op has been in business for more than 30 years, which if you look at traditional business, that's a long time, right? To make it past 5 years of operation is considered a pretty big accomplishment in the business world. Next, please.
All right.
And just thinking of the future that we're working to create together, right? And thinking about what does it mean when our businesses are rooted in our communities, when they will not pick up and abandon our communities in search of higher profit, and when we stay accountable to our communities so we can focus on rebuilding and long-term stability and resilience for our communities. And a study was done in Canada of comparing co-ops to corporations. And if you look on the left, the light green is cooperative businesses and the gray, blue, darker color is other business corporations. And you can see the co-op advantage is even stronger when you move out into 5 or 10 years over time. And that's because of if you're accountable to and owned by your community is going to let you know if you're not serving them, right? And so thinking of this as a tool for long-term stability and resilience as we move forward, whether it's like a couple people mentioned, looking at different kinds of converting to a land care business, which I have examples of that, or looking at cooperatively owned land trusts, et cetera. There are a number of examples of how you can create resilience through the cooperative structure. Next, please. So I wanted to kind of summarize by thinking about what the cooperative structure offers. And when you build a food co-op or any type of cooperative, you are building and joining a movement, right? Suzette mentioned some of the values and principles that unite all cooperators across the globe, but it's not just a grocery store or a farm or a print shop or a cooperatively owned pickle business. And structuring our businesses and structuring the businesses that you want to create or convert based on the principles of mutual aid and cooperation, using a cooperative structure means that we can move closer to creating a future we actually want, that we would actually choose, and not feeling powerless and like, how the hell did we get here, right? And I just want to say that mutual aid is cooperation. The first Black-led co-ops in our country were called mutual aid societies. And that's because when we organize to meet our community's needs, using solidarity, not charity model and mutual aid framework for cooperation, we are recognizing that all of us, I'm pointing at all of you, right? That our health, our dignity, our well-being, we're bound up in each other. And that's the foundation for how we can rebuild a world that serves us collectively. And so I imagine some of you have also been aching over how much cooperation and mutual aid has been missing at a national scale. And how our communities and how our country could be different if we return to those roots and that structure. And it just is, going back to these things, like, so if through the cooperative structure, we're looking at developing local skills and assets, pooling our limited resources for a community benefit, like Deep Root Organic Co-op, right? Rather than 15 farmers or 20, I forget how many it is, having to each be marketers in addition to farmers. They have jointly hired one person that helps sell their products. That allows them to do what they love doing, which is farming, right? And when we focus on community need over maximizing profit, Franklin Co-op, Community Co-op in Greenfield, Massachusetts and Shelburne Falls, they organized a mutual aid framework at the beginning of the pandemic called, I believe, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, that was connecting the members of their food co-op so that higher risk members could have other lower risk members shopping for them, right? There's a lot of response to crisis that can happen when we're focusing on meeting our collective needs versus the profit. And co-ops are very difficult to buy out or move. And for anyone who's lived in a community where your grocery store has shut overnight because your community wasn't generating enough profit, remember the grand unions? That happened to me, that's happened to a number of us. Without even, right, there's no warning, it just closes. That leaves a huge gap in food security. And that are, you know, the cooperatives are much longer lived. It really is helping us with a solution for rebuilding and a foundation for rebuilding our world that is going to serve us collectively. So now we want to brainstorm with you all.
Well, Bonnie, before we go to the next slide, I think it would be great if you touch on just a bit on a couple of the startups that are particularly in Massachusetts that you and we have been working with, and like what is it? What was the instigation for having them start?
Yeah, so what's interesting is about a third of our members are communities that don't have open food co-ops yet, but they're organizing to open them, which takes a lot of time and resources. And one example of that is Dorchester Food Co-op, which is in Dorchester, Massachusetts, one of Boston's most diverse neighborhoods, and also dealing with the highest rates of diet-related illness, et cetera. So Dorchester Food Co-op is, they're really looking to increase access to healthy food, to boost the local economy, and their mission is around food justice and redistribution of wealth, right? So that's what's driving them to organize a food co-op. There's another co-op organizing in Amherst. So any local, join them, become a founding member owner and help them get on the ground. And they're also organizing around, they're called Common Share Food Co-op. They are also really being motivated by food justice. And they have solidarity shares and they have a growing number of member owners, but they're looking at really strengthening the local food system and working towards drawing together the diverse communities to build an inclusive space around food justice and local resilience. Does that sound like shopping for groceries? No, it's so much more, right? But I can't wait to walk through the doors of that store, right? When you walk in, knowing where your money is going and what you're investing in is much bigger than just food.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, someone actually posted a link to Common Share. Great.
Yay, good. Okay, so we can go back. We want to go back to those original questions, and they're big questions, and we want to spend a little time actually hearing from you all what ideas and thoughts you have around how might we continue to build in the next 20 years. What is particularly from with the use of cooperatives. So we have, we intentionally want to set aside some time to just really brainstorm that. And so we could do that either via, people could write questions or thoughts in the chat, but they could also, you could also unmute yourself and just tell us what you're thinking, what's come up for you after last night's talk, but also this morning too, and where you are at.
Suzette, I'm wondering if we could actually if you go to the next slide and we can post the questions in the chat and then stop sharing so we can all see each other's faces.
Okay. Oh,
I'll grab, unless people like looking at the slide, I can try to grab the questions so that we can create a brainstorm room and see each other. Maybe people don't want to be seen right now. It's early.
So
I can type.
Okay. So
You want to ask the first question?
Yeah. So just in general, so what, given what are the gaps or needs in our region in the food system, and can that need be met through a cooperative? We know there's been, various studies around and work already around what are the state of our feeding the Commonwealth and our food systems, but what do we see as that could be met through the formation of cooperatives? That's one to think about. Are there some edges? Are there ideas that people might have? And of course, in a brainstorm and in thinking and just imagining it, there's no wrong answers. It's whatever what comes up for you.
So Suzette, do you want to just focus on that one question and folks can chime in just around that first one for now?
Sure, yeah.
Great, okay. And do you want to take off the screen share so we can see each other?
Okay. Let's see. All right, I can just do. All right, there we go.
If people feel comfortable showing your beautiful faces, we'd love to see them, but you don't have to.
Well, I'm going to jump in since I'm already unmuted here. I'm involved with an interpreter and translation co-op here in the Valley, and I actually was put in touch with somebody from the newly forming co-op in Amherst, and we haven't connected yet. It's been sort of in the back of my mind, but this is motivating me to actually reach out more actively. But I am realizing that sort of if you're looking at the gaps, often a language barrier is one of those gaps. And so as an interpreter co-op or translation co-op, we can help with interpreting and translating materials and filling that gap. And so I look forward to making that connection. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, actually the City Market Onion River Food Co-op in Burlington, part of their work around wanting to be more inclusive is they're in the process of translating their pamphlets and information into, what was it, Bonnie, 5 different languages, I think?
5 languages. There's a number of refugees that resettle in the Burlington area, and so they worked with the local refugee resettlement agency to say, what are the top 5 languages spoken in our community? So they're in the process right now of doing that.
Yeah.
I'm seeing in the chat here from Brucey, one of the gaps is around gleaning, right? Rescuing or addressing food waste and looking at Boston area gleaners, Food Link. Could the co-op model work for food rescue organizations? It's a great idea. And I've certainly seen our food co-ops advertising and connecting and supporting the gleaning initiatives. The gleaning initiative, for example, in the Monadnock region is run through the community kitchen, but it's directly related and supported through the food co-op. That's interesting to think about. Could food co-ops could gleaners come together and structure as cooperatives so that they could pool up and have a larger number of members to activate?
A relatively new worker co-op in Greenfield is the Compost Cooperative, and they are doing commercial and household compost pickup and then bringing it to a composting facility. But they intentionally formed as a worker co-op to have a business. Specifically also a mission to employ post-incarcerated folks, people that are coming out, and they're small, but they're just serving Greenfield and Montague at this point, but they're growing, and it was, you know, meeting a need around compost and dealing with waste and forming it as a co-op.
Yeah, and Adam, I don't see Adam. Oh yeah, no, I do. Adam, do you want to share your idea? Do you want to unmute yourself and share your idea? All right, maybe Adam. Oh, Adam shared about, like, are there other needs of farmers that aren't being addressed with current cooperatives, such as cooperatively getting produce or products to distant farmers markets? That's a great idea, kind of convening products cooperatively. And that's, you know, that's sort of the structure of a farmer or producer co-op, like Deep Root, where you're bringing together product and then looking at all the different avenues to sell it and who needs it, and then distribution as well. That's a great idea. Housing. Oh, housing co-ops is a great example from Dale. You know, there are resident-owned communities. They're also known as ROCs. When I went to incorporate the food co-op in Keene, the most commonly used form of cooperatives in New Hampshire was resident-owned communities, where, you know, people who are living in resident-owned communities, but they're on land that they do not own, they are able to collectively chip in and purchase the land, so that they're not vulnerable to the land being sold out from underneath their mobile homes. And so it's a very powerful model. I'm wondering if you meant specifically related to the food system, because I think housing for farm growers and farm workers is certainly a need that we could use the cooperative model to fill. Great idea.
Yeah. This one from, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to thank Heather, keeps posting great resources into the chat to give examples of that. There's the Massachusetts Association of Housing Co-ops. There's an example of, in Boston, Cerro Cooperative does commercial compost, which is super cool. And there's also resident-owned community. You can look more about how people are getting control over where they live.
Another exciting development, really recent development, is co-ops, two co-ops working together. Oxbow Design Build, which is in East Hampton, they do, you know, commercial and residential design and building. They recently hooked up with the compost cooperative folks, because one of the things that the members of the compost cooperative found was that housing was a challenge. And so they are working with Oxbow folks to find, and I think they have located a house that would be able to house people, and either as a transition spot or longer term, so that they can work in the co-op. And so it is a great example of you know, co-op folks working in other areas to see the perpetuation of ownership and resiliency building in their community. So there's, you know, one of the other things that we found, and across the board, is cooperative people who have formed cooperatives and are currently working in cooperatives generally, I think overall, are very interested in helping others and share information and help other people who are interested in either converting to a co-op or starting a co-op in their area. So there's a huge resource around what people have already been through and working on in their community to help others do it too. Because it's not, you know, most of our work has been with food co-ops, but conversions for worker co-ops, existing businesses converting to worker co-ops, or other startups, it's it's not an easy answer. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and
yeah, I just want to make sure we touched on Emily's question about low-income
yeah,
consumers being able to buy into a co-op.
I was just going to say that. And so Emily, I'll share your question, and then if you want to like appear out of thin air and add to it, or that would be great as well. So Emily was asking, what about low-income consumers, especially in urban areas, who might not be able to buy into a co-op or might not have knowledge of them? That's definitely a barrier that a number of our co-ops that are located in cities are working on. And one thing that's, you know, a number of our food co-ops have ways to make membership accessible to all community members. So they have membership for all programs. And so our startup food co-ops are realizing from the go, even though they have very few resources, that they need to put in what they call solidarity shares, it's right from the beginning. And so that means that you can buy into a co-op, become a co-op member for $5, or in some cases, you at the beginning invest nothing and over time you pay it off. And so really limiting the barriers to be able to access members, because that's something that you don't want the co-op built up on the shoulders of only people that have the privilege of having more wealth, right? And so that's something that especially this generation of newest startups are totally adamant about and being incredibly creative. And so I'll share my screen for 1 second here. But you can see, for example, with Common Share, they have something called a solidarity share. They say, we're committed to building an inclusive economy that gives everyone the opportunity to live a well-nourished life and removes any obstacles to becoming a member owner. So you can donate if you have more wealth, and you can become a member owner for next to nothing if you are financially strained, right? So that's one issue. The more challenging thing in some ways, right, is looking at like overcoming the education challenge, I would say, around cooperatives. Who are cooperatives meant for? Like there's a perception that food co-ops, for example, are meant for granola crunchy hippie, white people, 70s. There's a lot of stigma and a lot of old notions of what cooperatives are that the entire movement has to overcome. And what's crucial to that is the retelling of the history, is that co-ops across the globe have liberated people from unjust situations, from poverty, from being burdened by being in debt to other owners. So I think part of what you're talking about is the challenge for our movement is to continue picking away at and retelling the story of cooperation, so that it's clear that the cooperative model has been, is, and will continue to be for everyone, and so that people feel included. But that is a challenge to be addressed. Is there anything you'd add to that, Emily? Because that was a great question. No? Okay, thumbs up. Great. Oh, Dale just asked an incredible question. How do credit unions support co-op business economics? Because there are a number of credit unions where you would never be able to tell in their marketing that they're a cooperative. And just like the food co-op movement has to do our work, right? Credit unions, in the credit union around Amherst is actually a great example of a credit union that understands cooperative education is foundational to its mission. So the UMass 5, can you share more about that, Suzette?
Yeah, it's the UMass 5 Federal Credit Union, and they, early on, I believe their program is still going, where they will actually do low or no interest loans for people to be able to purchase CSA shares. And they recognized early on that that's a way that they could contribute to people's well-being with wanting to do CSAs and not really having access. And they, like with cooperatives, they are owned by people who are members who have accounts. So the member benefits and the services that they offer are to meet the people's needs, rather than like in big banking to make a few wealthy. So that's the credit unions are consumer co-ops. They're owned by not by the people that are work there, but by the consumers, those of us who have accounts. And UMass 5 has a reputation for being able to do car loans to people who it might be slightly riskier, but you can get a loan from your credit union rather than from they're a community bank rather than one of our larger banks.
Right, and there's also a National Association of Credit Unions I can share. And so what's great about them is that in addition to just serving all the credit unions in our country, they take advocacy. They have a bipartisan advocacy team, and they are working, their priorities are fighting for mortgage lending and housing and tax issues and bank attacks. And then they create actions you can take, which, as you can imagine, there's a number of actions we could take, right? So I think a piece of it that's important, especially there's a National Cooperative Business Association as well, where a core component and a core reason that our food co-ops and our other co-ops were able to access PPP loans was making sure that food co-ops and farmer co-ops, et cetera, are included, and credit unions are included in relief packages to COVID. So there's a lot, I think, I forget who it was that mentioned advocacy. I think Heather mentioned advocacy, and that's a really important piece, because as a number of you have pointed out, if people don't understand co-ops or know about them, how are they going to advocate for them? How are they going to learn about them, right? But I do think the credit unions, a number of our food co-ops, you know how a number of food co-ops have ATMs, and the ATMs are to the local credit union. So that's just one example of how food co-ops and credit unions have partnered. A co-op in Ithaca, New York, Green Star, one of our members, they had their credit union did a membership drive for the food co-op. They sat in the local college at their new college town store, and there was a benefit. The credit union gave folks a benefit if they joined and became a member of the local food co-op. So there's partnerships like that too that I wish were universal and all of our food co-ops and credit unions. But it's a great example of to be an integrated, thriving cooperative economy. We could be member owners of credit unions with our finances, and through food co-ops be able to invest into the local food system and purchase from cooperative farmers that were gathered as co-ops, so that the money is not being extracted or leaving our community. And the control, right? The control stays within our communities. And imagine if all of our communities, what if all of our communities were structured that way? And so the trade between communities was also amongst cooperatives. It would not be allowing a Jeff Bezos to exist. There should be no billionaires that exist in our world. There should be no trillionaires. That's obscene. Why does anyone need that much money? I'll stop before I rant. Suzette, do you want to move to the next question? I can just type it also in the chat.
Yeah, that would be good. I was going to say that would be good to put it in the chat. And see. Okay. I love all the resources that people are posting in the chat. And remind us, either Ashley, around if people want to save the chat, how they do that.
Oh yeah, so there's at the bottom, at the very bottom of your chat, there should be a little thing that says ... and then save chat should come up.
Oh yeah. Yep. I just did that. So Suzette, do you want to just ask the second question as I'm typing it in?
Let's see if I can. Sorry. Oh yeah, wait a minute. So this another question we had was, in 2040, thinking ahead, how will we have rebuilt our communities and our systems to help us feed the Commonwealth and have cooperative ownership and accountability? So if we are, here we are, 19, 20 years later, and we're in 2040, what would we want to see? Where have we come? What are some things that we might have been able to accomplish?
And we'd love to hear from you directly if anyone wants to unmute.
One of the things that I learned about a few years ago is our funeral co-ops. And in Canada, they have a number of funeral co-ops where people are members to take care of their family needs around services and burial or cremation or whatever however you want to deal with in your family, because I mean, it's another, I know there's here and in other parts of the country, there's a consciousness of green burial, and also taking back and being more in charge of people's when they have family members die. And it's another whole area that is like, it seems like is completely out of our control to a degree. And so I don't know that I would want to take on organizing it, but I would participate in if I was now in 2040 or 2050, I would want our family and us to be involved with a funeral co-op of some sort. Perhaps around green burial too. I can't see, what did I
Right,
do?
and I think if anyone here a musician? No, I can't see. Oh, Priscilla is. So another area where it's like, what you can look at co-ops as, where are people getting screwed, and then how do people find a solution? So where musicians get screwed is through iTunes or something, right, where they're being paid very little, the average musician. So there's actually a cooperative that just launched for where you can subscribe, you can be a member owner, and you can be a worker owner so it's a multi-stakeholder, so musicians can subscribe, and it's a way for them to share their music and where the profits go directly back to them as owners. I'll look up the name of it because I just learned about it myself. I wonder too, going back to the beginning to see what you all had typed in about what you were hoping to learn.
Well, one thing is, that we didn't touch on at all, but one of our resources that I will put up that screen is the National Cooperative Business Association. And they have, as far as, all states have some form of incorporating legally as a cooperative. Massachusetts is particularly more, friendly around that. And you can access the legal information for any state through the National Cooperative Business Association.
Right. And I just posted that in the link. But one thing that's interesting too is that there are a number of, if you were to tomorrow want to change some part of your farm or food operation or business operation to a co-op, and if you ask a friend who's a lawyer, sometimes the lawyers also don't know about cooperatives. And so we've had a number of our food co-ops that have been incorporated as LLCs, or is another thing that actually undermines all the things we're talking about, the democratic structure, the accountability, the ownership. And it's no fault on the lawyers. It's what you're taught. Why aren't we taught about cooperatives in school? Why aren't we taught about cooperatives in business school? Why aren't you taught taught about cooperatives in law school. And so I think it is important, and we've had to work in Connecticut, you know, thinking back to Heather's question about advocacy, a huge barrier to forming a cooperative in Connecticut was that their co-op statutes sucked. And so we worked with the national lawyer, David Swanson, and our food co-ops in Connecticut and other cooperatives in Connecticut to update the co-op statutes for the first time in I don't know how many years. So that moving forward, if you want to start a food cooperative or any type of cooperative in Connecticut, there's now a good, recent, modern cooperative statute that you can incorporate under, where you will actually be able to fulfill your mission through the legal structure of your business. So I would just urge all of you, if you're interested in forming a cooperative, to check with NCBA, or also we have a manual that we put together with New England Farmers Union that includes all statutes. So I'll post that as well.
So there's a comment from Adam. In 2040, one piece I'd like to see is a blockchain-based supply chain for all farms to manage produce movement and compensate them for their food in a larger cooperative-based market system that reaches all citizens, and especially those in food deserts, while creating a market for solidarity shares, fresh food, education, and valuing soil health. Yeah, really linking it also to the soil health and the health of our farmlands and our farms. Yeah, Adam, do you want to say anything else about what you're thinking with that, or just that's?
Thank you. This is Adam. It's a huge idea, but it's a lovely dream. And I think it's probably based off my desire to see technology blossom in healthy ways. And when I go to the farmer's market, every time I put my card in a Square device in order to buy my fresh produce, the company Square takes a little piece of the puzzle. And we can create a different type of financial system. I think that would benefit the farmers directly.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I love that. It's sometimes our food co-ops, especially the smaller ones, will post notices to their members saying, like our large co-op that does $60 million in sales and it has 5 stores, millions of dollars are leaving the community to pay the credit card companies, which you know, thinking about what you're talking about with both technology and how to break down the consolidation, wouldn't that be amazing, right? And right now, a challenge that our co-ops are having, a lot of our co-ops have needs-based discounts, food for all, that if you are a lower income shopper, that you get 10% off on groceries every time you shop. And that's money coming out of their profit, but essential to their mission of making sure the whole community eats, right? So a challenge is some of their customers that are part of the Food for All program are high risk, right, to COVID, and they want to shop online and participate in and buying food through their Mercado or other online platforms, which do not allow you to use EBT or WIC. And the only places that you're allowed, the pilots have been done. Guess where the pilots were done? Walmart and Amazon, right? And so those are legal structures that are standing in the way of our community members being able to shop at their local store and buy the food that they want to buy. It's taking away autonomy, it's taking away control. So I agree with Adam, it's like, that's a big system to dismantle, but it has to be, we have to keep chipping away at it. And there is advocacy doing that. A couple of food co-ops have actually worked to become part of that pilot. And I'm working to help other of our food co-ops expand, so that that's taking away one more barrier. And right now what's happening is that of someone who's wanting to pay with EBT can still do it. They just have to, they don't want to come in the store, so they drive up and a staff member runs out, takes their credit card, runs back in the store, right, and does it. So it's just, you know, we're having creative workaround, but it's not, it doesn't feel great for either party involved.
I want to, let's make sure we asked in the last few minutes the last question, but also Emily had a post there too. So our last question is, what can I do to support an integrated, thriving cooperative economy. So on the personal level, what might one do? What are some steps that they might take? If anybody has any thoughts on that in the last few minutes. And then also, let's see. So, and if, oh no, it was, I'm sorry, it was Dale that had a comment about working with communities clustered near poor air quality transport corridors. Dale, did you want to say anything else about that? About your comment?
No, I think places that need addressing that are not being addressed, and you know, I don't know what the best entry point to do any of this is, but it seems like co-ops would be a good model to use.
Yeah.
And Priscilla just said, join a co-op or two if you haven't already and become an active member. And that's a great idea. You know, like, I feel sheepish because I've missed my credit union's last 2 annual meetings. I have 2 kids under 7. So you know, but it is something where becoming not just a member, but an active participant in your co-op is certainly something. And then invite your friends and family to do the same. Excellent idea, Priscilla. Yeah. And Suzette, just FYI, we got to give Jocelyn the mic for the last couple minutes.
Okay.
So we'll want to wrap up in a couple minutes.
I wanted to just put up, I know you put some things in the post, but here's our other, can you see this resource slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing for those folks who are interested in starting cooperatives of any sort, at 10:21 in the chat, I posted the New England Farmers Union Co-op Development Manual, which is a really great overview, especially for agricultural co-ops, some of the first steps to consider. If you want to start a food co-op, that's a whole different thing. That food co-op initiative would be the best resource.
Yeah.
Ooh, and Dale could post something every day to social media. That's a great idea. I was just talking to our executive director yesterday about making sure that all of our posts are helping to identify the cooperative difference, right? To folks that are not like, oh, this is what makes co-ops different.
Yeah. Part of our work with our posting is to make sure that we share what our food co-ops, the innovative and cool things that and everyday things that our food co-ops are doing, because just to get it out there even more, like from who they donate to, who they partner with, who they're honoring or highlighting. Those are all, like, we so need to keep reminding ourselves about all of the good work that that people are doing.
Right. And Dale, we can make your job easier if you follow NFCA, because we try to post examples from across sectors as well, around just cool ways people are using food co-ops or cooperative model, sorry, not food co-ops, the cooperative model to innovate. So I can post our Facebook page as well if you want to follow along. Anyone want to, oh wait, I guess it's 2 minutes to talk. I was going to say, I want to hear another voice besides ours, so maybe the other voice will be John wrapping it up. But just want to thank everyone for participating and for your excellent questions and provocations around what we can do and how we can take power and control back into our own hands. So thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank you. It's a learning curve for us too.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Thank you, Suzette. If either of you want to share your email or a way to get in touch with you in the chat, sometimes that's helpful for folks. And if you want to stop screen sharing for a second, I just want to make a couple closing announcements here. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming. Couple quick things. I thought there was a slide missing earlier, but I think I skipped over it. And so I want to come back to this. We do want to always make sure that we are coming back to our land acknowledgement. This is something we do in pretty much all of our workshops and events at NOFA Mass. So we just want to acknowledge that we are on land that was managed and inhabited before European colonization, And we encourage everybody to take a minute, and it's probably just as well now at the end of the workshop to take a minute. Maybe Ashley can share this website with you in the chat if you want to see a map of your area and the folks who were occupants on that land before European colonization. All right.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks so much for coming. I'll keep the chat open for a few minutes if anybody wants to download it again now that we have all these wonderful resources. Thanks a lot.